outside.
Yeah.
Nothing in it.
Yeah. I do that inside. It's not a good picture. Well, good afternoon. My name's Dave Camp from Michigan, and I'm joined here by House and Senate colleagues from the Great Lakes region and my co-sponsor in the Senate, Senator Debbie Stabenow, because we really want to highlight the issue, the threat that Asian carp pose to the Great Lakes. And with the Supreme Court deciding not to act on the lawsuit brought by several attorneys general around the region, including the Attorney General of Michigan, it makes acting legislatively much more important. Now, today we did get some welcome news that the administration has decided to close the locks for at least the Chicago Canal for a week and poison the river, which is, I think, an important step forward in acknowledging that we have to have a barrier of separation between the locks and the Great Lakes. They are beginning with the area that has seen the most DNA, and we believe it's an important first step. Obviously, there's much more we need to do. We would like to see the establishment of additional barriers, reinforcing the barriers, and closing the locks temporarily, taking into account the economic hardship that may happen to the region as a result of that, as well as any potential flooding and other natural causes that may occur. And under this legislation, obviously, if there is a flood, the locks would be opened. We want to make sure that those safety concerns are taken into account. But this is a critical issue. It is time to stop playing around with this important thing, because the potential devastating impact on the entire Great Lakes and the Great Lake region is significant. And as I've said, we need to stop flirting with disaster, and we need to act and act quickly. So I'm pleased that this effort was made this morning to close the locks at least for a week to address the issue. But much more needs to be done, and we need to push this legislation, and we're all here as a call to action to make sure that this issue stays in the forefront and that we move forward as quickly as possible. So with that, why don't I introduce Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, who is the sponsor of the Senate legislation.
Thank you. Well, it's my great pleasure to be joining with Congressman Camp and all of our colleagues in the House and the Senate to put forward what is a very simple and straightforward response to a very, very serious issue for us. We're talking about a $7 billion recreational fishing industry, a $16 billion recreational boating industry, and frankly, our way of life. The Great Lakes, the love of the Great Lakes are in our DNA. And we are standing here saying that because of the threat, it is critically important that we close the locks until we have a permanent solution. The Great Lakes Commission has called for a permanent ecological separation of the waters between the Mississippi and Illinois rivers with the Great Lakes. That's something that the Army Corps is looking at, and we are working on efforts going forward to make sure that they make recommendations as quickly as possible on the permanent solution, because that's what we need to have happen. But until that time, we need to do everything possible to make sure that we are stopping the Asian carp, the 100-pound fish that jump out of the water and attack people, that eat the fish food, all of the food on the bottom of the lake, so that all of the other kinds of fish will not be able to survive. There are so many implications of this that we need to make sure we're doing everything humanly possible, and that's really what we're all about. So I think we're also all standing here because we disagree with the Supreme Court decision. Very disappointed the Supreme Court would not act, but that means that our Carp Act needs to get passed in the House and the Senate as quickly as possible. As Congressman Camp said, we had welcome news today that the O'Brien locks, where they found the DNA from the Asian carp, will be closed on May 20th. for 5 or 6 days. They will be using a poison called rotenone in a 2-mile stretch above the electric barrier downstream from the O'Brien Lock and Dam in the Calumet Canal that will be fully contained. The poisoning method also was used in a 6-mile stretch of the Chicago Sanitary Shipping Canal downstream back in December. And at that time, they found one of the bighead carp. And so we will be anxiously waiting to see what they find after the poisoning that will be done. This is the deepest part of the area. The poisoning is required. Netting is not enough. And step one is to do the poisoning and to close it for a week, but we believe it's very, very important that they continue to keep the locks closed, understanding, as Congressman Camp said, that we certainly don't want to flood neighborhoods in Chicago. We certainly understand the concerns in terms of tourism, but working with the administration, we want to keep a sense of urgency about the seriousness of what is going on here. So the Great Lakes Commission has recommended the ecological separation permanently going forward. We need to work together to get that done. This is something we all care deeply about, and we want to pass the Carp Act so that we can then continue on with a permanent long-term solution.
All right. And we're also joined by Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Thank you, Senator Stabenow. Thank you for your leadership, as well as I know Senator Feingold's here. We've got Wisconsin, Minnesota. You know, we may be rivals in football, but not here. And I'm not making any Brett Favre jokes. Okay, so as you know, I'm the senator from the land of 10,000 lakes. But Minnesota is actually the land of 9,999 lakes plus one Great Lake, and that is Lake Superior. Congressman Paulson and I come from a state that spends $50 million, visitors and our own residents, on worms and bait every year, just to give you the sense of the importance of fishing to our economy. The Asian carp are threatening our inland waterways as they've made their way up the Mississippi River. Now they're threatening Lake Michigan and the rest of the Great Lakes. Their introduction would be devastating to the Great Lakes fish and ecosystems. These aggressive non-native species have already wreaked havoc in the lower Mississippi and Missouri rivers, disrupting local ecosystems due to their large size, destructive eating habits, and rapid rate of reproduction. It can reach 100 pounds, as Senator Stabenow so vividly described from that YouTube video. To amend the old saying, give a man an Asian carp, he'll eat for a week. Teach a man to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes, he'll be able to fish for a lifetime. So our message here is that we need to save the ecosystems as well as the important tourism business up in our part of the country, and the way we do this is by passing this bill. Thank you very much.
And Congressman Mike Rogers from Michigan.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Senators. You know, the diversity of thought on this platform is probably about as diverse as the number of fish we have in the Great Lakes. The good news is everyone here today agrees of the danger of these fish, the Asian carp, getting into our Great Lakes. And we've had a lot of discussion about the economic impact of this. Some $7 billion, some estimate maybe as high as $20 billion for the Great Lakes, versus the $64 to $70 million for the the people of Illinois. That's something we can get over. But what we can't do is undo the carp once they get into the Great Lakes. That is a universal agreement on the danger of what this fish does to our ecosystem. And I can tell you, I've been very fortunate in my life to be able to fish in Lake Michigan and Huron and Erie. I haven't been up to Superior yet, at least at fishing anyway. And it is a spectacular thing if you're a fisherman or angler of any sort. And it sounds like a pretty tall fish story, but I can tell you this is one big fish story that everybody here can agree to, and that is how dangerous this is, not just economically, but to the ecosystems of the Great Lakes. And once they change, there is no way for us to wind this thing back. That's what's so dangerous. That's why I see so many of us here making the pitch today that we pass this and pass it now. And I think anyone here on this platform would sit down with the Illinois delegation and work out the economic impacts. I don't think anybody here would turn that meeting away in an instant. We know it does have an impact. We want to help them through that impact, but we need to put the ecosystem of the Great Lakes and the $7 to $20 billion of economic ruin at risk. This is the time to act, and we must do it now.
Thank you. Senator Russ Feingold.
Thank you. I'm from a state with actually more than 10,000 lakes. No,
But no Brett Favre.
no, and we're fine with that. We're happy about that. All right, back to the serious stuff. Actually, Wisconsin, most of its border is water. We have, of course, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, not to mention Mississippi that divides us. In fact, recently I was in Door County, Wisconsin. They said that that county has more shoreline than any county in the United States of America. So this is so absolutely critical. A sustained population of Asian carp would have a devastating environmental, ecological, and economic effects on the Great Lakes. So all I can do is second and third what's been said. In a previous meeting with key federal officials responsible for this issue, I made it clear that my concern about this is that we need to have every option on the table going forward, in addition to what's been done today and what this legislation will do. But I want to thank Senator Stabenow and all members for their leadership on this.
Thank you. And Congressman Dale Kildee from Michigan.
Thank you. I'll be brief. My greatest nightmare, having been born on the Great Lakes, is that the Great Lakes will become a giant smorgasbord for the Asian carp to ravage. And that will happen. Once they get in, they ravage. They suck up almost everything in that lake. And they suck up the food for the other fish. It doesn't take long then to have that just really a barren place. So we don't want that as a smorgasbord for those Asian carp.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. And Congresswoman Candace Miller.
Thank you. I'm delighted to stand here with a bipartisan multi-state delegation here to talk about this terrible threat that's facing our magnificent Great Lakes. And all of us, I think, have been involved, unfortunately, with some very painful challenges with invasive species for a number of years. I know I have for the last 30 years. We've had the terrible things that have happened with the round gobies and the zebra mussels and hundreds of others invasive species. But this is certainly, I think, the biggest challenge that we have ever seen in the Great Lakes. And because of that, a number of us wrote a letter, actually, and signed a letter. I think all of us have signed a letter to our leadership, asking them to consider bringing the Carp Act very quickly, expediently, to both the House and the Senate, and go as fast as they can with this, because time certainly is of the essence. You know, the Chicago Diversionary Canal, where these invasive species are coming, these Asian carps, we talked about all these other invasive species, they've all come through the St. Lawrence Seaway. Actually, we've had some success now because we do have 100% of all the salties that come through the St. Lawrence Seaway. Finally, after decades of working on that, they are inspected to make sure they don't carry invasive species or take other mechanisms before they enter and exit the Great Lakes system. But these are coming up the Mississippi River through the Chicago Diversionary Canal that was built over 100 years ago. You would never be able to build such a canal today, because not only because of the invasive species we're looking at, but there are 2 billion gallons of Great Lakes water that is diverted through this canal as well. And we recognize the people in Illinois and why they built it then and what they are using it for now. And as was mentioned, I think we are all extremely sensitive as well to the negative economic impact that they will face if we are successful in doing what we want to do, which is close those locks permanently. And I am certain that we can reach an accommodation with them, whether that is building an offloading site at the end of by the locks so that they could offload their good and commerce to transit in other ways, by road, by rail, what have you. We are very sensitive to what they are facing, and I know that this is something that we would all work together on. It does require a comprehensive national solution for it, but I am very hopeful that the House leadership and the Senate leadership will expedite the Carp Act.
Thank you. Congressman Mark Schauer.
Thank you, Congressman Camp. I'm pleased to co-sponsor your bill and to be here with Democrats and Republicans from the House and the Senate about a national emergency. 1/5 of the world's fresh water is found in the Great Lakes. And what we are facing if we don't enact a permanent solution, and I agree that the permanent solution includes a separation of the watershed. I think that is the best chance to avoid this national catastrophe. But I think there is an equivalence between what's happening in the Gulf region now with an oil spill. It's a disaster that probably could have been prevented. We know we can prevent this disaster from happening. I think the parallels are both environmental impacts, in this case on not just on the Great Lakes waters themselves and the very fragile estuaries, but on the rivers and streams that flow from the Great Lakes that will have unmeasurable damage. The economic impact is clear. We know all of the industry, not just tourism and fishing, but businesses that want to come to our Great Lakes region because of our natural resources and, of course, this great fresh water. But we can prevent this from happening. And if we don't, I don't think we can reverse it. The Gulf region may be able to clean up all of the oil. I don't think we will ever be able to rid our Great Lakes of this species that will reverse forever this tremendous natural and economic resource we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Thad McCotter.
Our late colleague from Illinois, Henry Hyde, once said, "Everything that needs to be said has been said, but not everyone that needs to say it has said it." I'm glad to be a part of this coalition to try to protect our Great Lakes. And in the spirit of a picture saying 1,000 words, I'm not pointing at you, Eric. I'm not pointing at you. Yeah. You have one chance to stop that bad boy from ravaging your Great Lakes. Let's not blow it. It does look a little like Paulson.
Well, with that note, Congressman Eric Paulson. Listen, I just want to say I'm joining this bipartisan effort because it is critical not only to the vitality of a state like Minnesota, but also to all of our states in the Great Lakes state. And Minnesota is also home to not only the headwaters of the Mississippi and 10,000 lakes, but also the Boundary Waters Canoe area. And as someone who wants to maintain that pristine area that is used by so many in our country and our nation, it's critical to draw attention to what is sometimes an overlooked issue that needs to be brought attention to as an urgent issue. So I'm proud to bring support as well in a bipartisan effort to hopefully make some progress on moving this issue forward. And Congressman Gary Peters.
Well, it is great to be here again. Everything has been said, so I'll be very brief, but I wanted to thank Congressman Camp for his leadership and Senator Stabenow in bringing this forward. And it's an honor to be here with all of my colleagues in both parties and across the region. And I think what Congressman Schauer is particularly appropriate in comparing it not necessarily severity, but what's happening down in the Gulf right now. And the thing that makes this issue very difficult, and for us to stand up here, although we have the visual of the fish there, not Thad McCotter there, the fish there, is that when we see the tragedy in the Gulf, it's so apparent to the whole country, as the whole country has been transfixed by it and watching the burning oil and the slick that's spreading everywhere and the animals that are dying. This is something that is not quite as apparent. It's the fish that is in the ecosystem that is eating the vegetation that then wipes out all of the indigenous species. So you can't see it. There isn't any burning oil on the surface. There isn't any slick to see. But it is also very devastating to an ecosystem as an ecosystem becomes destroyed. And as was mentioned by my colleagues, a way of life that we've known in Michigan as well as throughout the Great Lakes region is changed forever. We can never put that back in the bottle. So it is important that we act swiftly, and I'm certainly privileged to be here with my colleagues as we do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairman John Conyers.
Thank you. Well, having not heard what everybody has said already, I merely want to add one thing, and that is that there have been those who have said to me that the invasive species have already started in the Great Lakes. I really respect the optimism that we can still keep them out, but there are some reports that it has already started. And when we start talking about the greatest body of lakes and water in the United States, and we're acting like this is something that has to be debated or contemplated or have hearings held on. The urgency is now, and I feel very alarmed, and I'm proud to join with every man and woman here that we're trying to get the appropriate authorities to take action immediately. This is a time question. This isn't maybe there's something that they would do that we wouldn't be grateful or appreciate. We know what they do. We know how they operate. We know how they multiply and grow. We know how they're so hard to contain, and that there is two views to this question is stunning to me. And so I'm proud to join all of you here today.
Thank you. Thank you, and we'll be glad to take any questions. Any questions? Yes.
It has been, you all talk about economic impact to Illinois, being willing to talk about some mitigating steps. Congresswoman Miller mentioned a possible facility or something like that. Are there anything else in the immediate that you all are looking at that might be a way to bridge the gap with Illinois?
Well, what we've had is we've had an economic impact study done that helps actually define what the problem is, and we believe that the shipping, much of the shipping, can be taken into account through other means, either rail or truck. But what we want is a temporary closure, because as so many of my colleagues have said, this is urgent, and we need to act now. So what we want to do is prevent a large-scale environmental and economic disaster from occurring. And so while the administration is going to close part of the canal, that is a recognition and a step forward in terms of what we need to do. But we believe this legislation needs to move so that we can begin to address the problems right away and keep the pressure on it.
So the temporary would be to close it temporarily and then get this legislation done.
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly.
I might just add then also that when we look long-term, I mean, the closing the locks are not the ideal long-term solution. What we need is to have the Army Corps of Engineers, and this is what we're pushing for right now, to have a very specific plan to determine what should be done to have what's called an ecological separation of the waters permanently. Redesigning the flow, making changes. We need to know the costs. We need to know the specifics on that as quickly as possible. Now, the Army Corps is looking at it now, but they said that they won't have the study done until 2012. That is not good enough. That is, yeah, absolutely. So we are now back pushing them, and we are developing a strategy to push them to be able to get some answers as quickly as possible. As Congress,
he's not going to wait till
I don't think he'll wait. No, and as Congressman Camp said, we're not talking about allowing flooding. I mean, if the locks were closed, or I think Congresswoman Miller may have said that the locks can be opened in case of flooding. If you're in Chicago, you see that the rivers are going right through the city. We appreciate that. We're not trying in any way to flood Chicago. But the reality is that can be mitigated, and the people we have heard from in terms of the tourism and the cargo traffic and so on, that can be done another way.
The other thing I'd ask, separate from the policy, but going to politics, if the president was from Duluth or Detroit, maybe this is a different scenario. Maybe he's standing up there. The president's from Chicago. What's the chance of getting a Chicago president to sign a bill?
Well, you know,
I'll let you start.
Yeah, I want to start just because I think it's unfair to say that because the president's from Chicago that somehow they're not working with us on this. Now, we have a different view. We'd like to see the locks closed right away and on a temporary basis, but right away till we get a longer-term solution. They are moving in other directions, but I believe when we look at the $475 million that this president, a Great Lakes president, has been willing, a historic level of funding for us. to be able to invest in the Great Lakes and what we need to be doing to clean up the Great Lakes and so on. That, you know, he is certainly demonstrating his commitment to the Great Lakes. When we came in December, we all came together on a bipartisan basis. They had found the DNA. We asked for immediate action. They redirected $13 million. They've now redirected $50 million for this effort. So, I would say, do I disagree with them in terms of wanting to close the locks immediately? Yes, I do. But I don't think this is about not understanding, having a passion for the Great Lakes. There's a difference in strategy right now.
And I will just say that we have, as the senator said, we did get some additional funding around Christmas time from the administration, and it is helpful that the locks are being closed in this temporary way. But we need them to do more, and we need to present a bill to the president and put it on his desk and have him sign it so that we can protect and prevent the largest environmental disaster in the country from occurring. It's huge numbers of jobs. It's huge in terms of environmental impact. And so this press conference is about putting the pressure on, trying to make sure that we get this legislation across the finish line.
And our friend here, the reporter, is from Minnesota, so you can see how aggressive the Minnesota press is. But I would just say, as much as we'd like a president from Duluth at some point, that the president, as Senator Stabenow mentioned, this is the most money ever put in recent history into the Great Lakes. And our job right now, the reason we're doing this, is to get this through Congress. We want to convince our colleagues. We have a great bipartisan group, so we can get this on the president's desk.
And I just want to add one thing. The faster we get to passage of this bill, the quicker we will get an agreement with Illinois on how to mitigate the costs. That's why we're all here. We believe that all of those issues, and most of the economic impact happens from the barge traffic. And you'll add about 2 train loads of goods per day. Chicago already deals with somewhere between 50 and 100 per day. This is something absolutely, for a little bit of money, we can help the barge. They're just going to be a little short of their normal route, but we can help get that to other transportation forms. And by the way, the study showed us that actually increases employment in Chicago, because you'll have more more hands on those goods, at least in the short term, and at the same time you save the economic and ecological system.
Well, you know, I'm shocked that a reporter would ask us if the president would be conferring with any of all these pals from the Chicago area about what to do about this. I mean, of course he isn't talking with them. And of course there's nothing political involved in this. If he were from Detroit, he would be taking the same position, I guess. But the fact of the matter is that many of the businesses, the commercial interests, don't want to interfere in any way. They don't realize that we're helping save them. They're going to be as disaffected by this, what could happen if we don't take action fast, as anybody else. If you're talking about whether the Great Lakes will continue to survive, look, these carp are up the Mississippi already. I mean, we act like that we're way ahead of the game. We're not. My fear is that we may be in a worse posture than any of us recognize at this point.
And let me just close by saying the president on his website, when he campaigned, said 0 tolerance for invasive species in the Great Lakes, and specifically mentioned Asian carp. So we believe that we want to hold the administration to that promise and make sure that occurs. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
You know, this is a
Thanks.
great press conference. Republicans have more confidence.
We all started to compete as
Thanks, Dave. Hey, thanks.
That we're not looking like we're just.
I have to tell you, it's very hard for me.
I know, but we need them to help us.
I understand. You're great. I did very well. I would say the combination of my good government reporter and John he doesn't know how to answer those questions.
They won't know even things from a week, and now they are.
No, I thought you guys were very restrained.
And they were very concerned that we were going to.